Hello and welcome to another edition of the Moving Iron Podcast. This podcast is proudly provided by Axon, helping dealers move more iron for almost 100 years. Find out more at axontire.com. Axon was started almost 100 years ago out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. It's that same passion that drives them today. With a vision for a better experience for both farmer and dealer, they set out to create a better way to move more iron. When you partner with Axon, you get immediate access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. Axon carries all major brands and sizes of tires, wheels, and tracks. From custom colors and sizes to fully customized wheels, you can have the solution for virtually any problem today's farmer is trying to solve. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Shawn Hackett. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. Tractorzoom delivering insights. And if you're looking for a great place to go and see what's happening in the auction marketplace, man, there's no better place than Tractorzoom's Iron Comps. And if you go to that and like what you see, at checkout, you can use Moving Iron, and you'll get yourself a little discount. Shawn is with Hackett Financial out of Boca Raton, Florida, and like usual, he is here for his weekly download of what's going on in the marketplace. So, Shawn, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing really, really good. I'm in Iowa today, and I'm thankful I'm here now versus 2 weeks ago because this is a little more hospitable to my fragile South Floridian nature.
Yeah, so. I can only imagine. Well, let's talk about wheat for a while here, Shawn. Shawn, there's a lot of people looking at wheat right now, and if you take a look at what you read and what we see out there, you know, obviously the corn and soybean, what's going to get planted, those kind of things are kind of overshadowing that, but that underlying issue, I think that's going to be a big catapult for the market. It's definitely going to be the wheat market, and we are starting to ease into that. You know, what happened during this last big shot of cold weather in Kansas and Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma. What's that going to look like? And we're about 30 to 60 days from really starting to see what that starts to look like, especially with the weather forecast that we see here for the next 30 days. So as you look at the wheat market and all the things that are going around the world with wheat, especially in Europe and especially in the Black Sea region in Russia, what's your thoughts on wheat?
Yeah, I view wheat as kind of the calm before the storm. We had this initial breakout on all this winter kill events that took place in Russia and here and even in China. But, you know, what happens winter kill, like you just said, you don't really know for sure, right? I mean, you just speculate, and the speculators say, well, we don't know, so we're going to sell off a little bit until we know more. And then you come out of dormancy, and then we start taking a look at the crop conditions. How is the crop coming out of dormancy? And that's where you start to see the evidence of what this winter kill event did in these different regions. So I think the USDA starts coming out with weekly crop conditions for winter wheat next week or two, pretty sure. And so that will be pretty important to see, you know, where are they? And there's some private outfits like the Wheat Board that does a good job with that give you real good indication for what's took place. And we believe it's going to show that there was some far more significant damage than I think the current market pricing is suggesting. And that's going to be the catalyst for the next move higher in the wheat market, because it's going to have to dial in the fact that the winter kill damage, which is permanent, by the way, when it's there. And then if we go into a warmer, drier spring, it just adds insult to injury. So the next 30 days, we could really see this kind of quiet winter wheat market wake up again after that initial flurry from that historic cold event that we had.
Yep. So I've been paying a lot of attention to that. I've been talking to some of my friends back home in Kansas and just seeing what they're saying, and not too many of them have a very rosy picture to paint, but also too there's a lot of how do you want to say that? There's just a lot of animosity, I guess, as you start looking towards what all the pressure that we've had, the dryness in the fall, and then here we are now, and then had this winter kill event, and then we had, not a lot of moisture in the forecast moving forward here in the spring. They're getting a little anxious about that and what that wheat market's gonna look like, and of course the old saying is everybody wants a drought. Nobody wants a drought. Everybody wants a drought except for on their farm, right? And so I think we might see that this year a little bit.
Yeah, drought's wonderful, just not on my farm.
That's right. Okay, so let's talk about the other crop out there that's tied closely to wheat, and that's rice. So if we do go down this path that we're seeing with wheat, and we're starting to see this price come up, and you're starting to see more and more movement in the rice marketplace, where do you start seeing that equilibrium where on the world marketplace, rice is going to start to outpace wheat and vice versa?
If you look at the wheat price and you look at the rice price, there's been a relationship between wheat trading. Rice trading at 1.5 times wheat versus 3 times wheat. That means that tells you. So when rice is at 1.5 times wheat, it's too cheap and it's ready to outperform. Meaning people just say, look, if I have these 2 important food items that I can feed my family with, at that price differential, rice is the way to go. So the demand goes for rice, and the rice price picks up, and vice versa. When rice trades at 3 times wheat, well, wheat's a better buy, so I'm going to go buy more wheat. And this has been what we did 1,000 year price analysis between the two. Believe it or not, there's actually cash prices throughout the world. They can put together 1,000 a year cash price chart. This 1.5 to 3 times ratio has been around for at least that 1,000 year period that we discussed. So where are we now? Well, we have let's just say we have a $6 wheat market. Let's just throw that as a nice round number, and we have a $13. $13.50 rice market. So when you run that number, we're at that 1.8 times. So rice is cheap. So rice is cheap. That means should start to outperform, especially if wheat takes another leg up here based upon what we just discussed. There's really very little room for rice to get much cheaper, and there's a lot of room for rice to get much more expensive. So just think what happened last year when the rice market went up to 25 last June, and it got to that 3 times wheat price level, and then topped out and it came crashing back down. So looking at this, any further strengthening in the wheat market would be very, very bullish for the rice market. On top of it, we're expecting to see at least a 20% to 25% reduction in U.S. rice acres, losing to soybeans, and to some extent losing to corn. So
yeah. So they're saying there could be some pretty decent moves then on what we see happening in the rice market moving forward.
Absolutely. And when you look at South American rice, they're just starting to harvest now, and they primarily grow that in the South Brazilian area, northern Argentine area, and that's the area that's been the worst of the drought, worst of the weather. It's not going to be a good crop for a 3rd year in a row. So everything says that the Western Hemisphere rice market, which is really what the U.S. price initially gets triggered off of, is going to get really, really tight here. And that's not even assuming that we have bad weather for Arkansas, for example, where they grow a ton of rice.
Right.
That's assuming 20% down, 25% down in acres, and the yields were okay. We don't think they're going to be. We actually think they're going to be below trend. So that's we're not even talking about that. But yes, rice has a lot of potential here. We think the rice market, U.S. rice price, looks to be pretty attractive right here.
Right. All right. So you brought up South America and what would be a Moving Iron podcast markets without talking about South America. So if you take a look at what's going down there, they're still having some issues getting crop out. There's backups at the port, which is not unheard of. I mean, that's a pretty common thing, but they're still having some issues with rain and those kind of things, getting crop out of the field and those kind of things, and it's still delaying that corn planting date, which we've talked about several times on here, where you were looking at pollination at the worst possible time on the planet, in the hottest part of the year. So I guess let's talk about that a little bit, and what's your thoughts on how is that going to affect what we see up here in the U.S.
Pretty much the agronomic understanding is that any corn that's planted beyond this week in March, like anything planted next week and beyond, your yield falls off dramatically. So last time I checked, I don't think they're going to get the crop planted by the end of this week. On any acre that's planted, and of course, the further delayed you get, we're talking about potential for 20 or 25 or even 30% declines in yields the further out you get beyond this week. So we're not going to have a top-end corn crop. It's virtually impossible. Whether it's a catastrophic crop or it's just a poor crop will depend upon exactly how, do they catch a few timely rains during the dry season in Brazil in May, which is where most of the corn is going to pollinate, that late April, May timeframe. But no matter how you slice it and dice it, those supplies are going to be late arriving anyway, meaning when the market would normally be getting them, they're going to be getting them 30 to 45 days later anyway, and they're going to be a much lower supply, even in the best case scenario. So there's just nothing that can come out of Brazil that's going to be good for the corn. That's going to be bearish for the corn market that we see. We're crossing the Rubicon. We're moving beyond the point of no return to really have a good second corn crop, which is the crop that they export to the rest of the world. So the corn crops can just stay on pins and needles here, Casey. It's just going to stay on pins and needles. We're going into a drought cycle. It's hard to see the corn market giving up too much ground other than a one or 2 day sell-off like we've seen from time to time, and then coming right back. There's just no way that the market's going to get comfortable with what's going down in South America right now.
Okay. So exports, you brought that as my next point I was going to bring up. The U.S. export marketplace, we're starting to see that seasonal slowdown to some extent, but not as much as we've seen in the past. But we are seeing some seasonal slowdown. China's buying as many beans out of Brazil as they can. But we're still seeing a fair amount of exports for this time of the year getting pushed out there. As you look at the export market and what the U.S. dollar is doing, what's your thoughts there? I mean, it's going to get to the point sooner or later here where we're kind of the only game in town, and we irregardless of price, if you want to buy export from us, I mean, this is where you're going to have to come get it at. I mean, so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we are going to be the only game in town. I mean, we didn't talk about Argentina, but if you look at the Argentina, they're experiencing some late season dryness, and if you look at the vegetative health maps, Casey, big blob of ugly, nasty purple red right on top of the core corn crop area of Argentina, showing that the vegetative health, and we went back and looked back 20, 30 years and found that it's one of the top 5 worst vegetative health ratings we've seen. So I'm not, you have to be a little careful. It's not an exact, it's not a perfect correlation, but what it's telling you is we're not going to have a good corn crop in Argentina. We can argue what it's going to be, but it's not going to be a good corn crop. So yeah, we are going to be the only game in town. And the other thing is, there's 2 things here. We've already exported 97% of what the USDA estimates we're going to export for the August. So begs the question, we know there's going to be more coming. Even if it's at half the rate that it was coming, we're going to be well above that. When does the USDA, we've talked about this, they kicked the can down the last report. When does USDA go, exports are a whole lot higher, and ending stocks are not 1.5 billion, they're 1.2 or something. I mean, I don't know if they do that next week's report. Maybe they do it at the end of the month's quarterly grain stocks report. They like to hide it in the quarterly grain stocks because they can say, well, we just can't find it. We don't know where it is. That sort of thing.
It's in China.
Where to go? So they like to kind of do that sleight of hand where they can just say, we don't know, it's residual, and we just have to adjust our numbers. But we had it right all along, that sort of thing. So putting all that together, I mean, the export market's still very bullish. We do not see exports dying off. I mean, maybe they calm down a little bit. But with what's going on in South America, the delay of Brazilian supplies, corn demand, export demand is going to remain strong. And that means that the market needs and must have a bin buster U.S. crop. And according to our work, as you know, ain't going to happen.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, it's that time of the year where every year is the best year ever report from the USDA. So that's where we're at. So
ever
best year ever. They've never had. This is going to be the best year ever. So I text Shawn, I don't know when it was, last week sometime, Thursday or Friday last week, I think. And I saw this article where the headline was, forgive me, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was like $16 corn and $25 beans and $30 wheat or some combination of that. And I was like, man, I know Shawn's bullish, but I don't think he's that bullish to put out an article like that. So I texted him kind of tongue-in-cheek, like, man, it looks like you're shooting for the stars here. And obviously it wasn't Shawn to put that out there. But But we have talked extensively here about what this grand solar minimum is going to look like, right? And what this coming fall and moving across the next 20 and 30 years as far as the solar radiation output of the sun goes. And we've talked about that. That's how I met Shawn to start with. So I guess our entire relationship here, Shawn, we've kind of orbited around the grand solar minimum theme here. So talk about that a little bit right now, where we're at, kind of what you're seeing happening, and basically what you have, kind of how the dominoes stacking up right now, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, the dominoes are stacking up exactly as we proposed on your program.
Yep.
I guess it's almost 2 years ago now.
Yep.
I mean, we outlined this 2 years ago. We actually outlined it 2 years before your program in our reports. I mean, that this was coming. I mean, this has been a forecast for us for a long time, because we can see, our algorithm, our natural weather cycle algorithm, and these cycles are we know what they are, and you can kind of project way out what's coming. So this La Nina, we've been warning about this La Nina of 21, 22 for a long, long time. We're in it. It's not going away, and it's going to launch. And this last this really, really cold snap that shattered all-time record cold temperatures across the board in so many areas, is what we're going to see next year. The only difference is, instead of being a couple of weeks, we think it's going to be 3 or 4 months of that kind of weather. So that and it's going to be this was a short and sweet winter, as we had forecasted it would be. But the next winter is going to be a long winter, meaning it'll start, let's say, late October, early November, and it's not going to be over until late May, like early May. Like and we believe spring will not exist. It's just going to go straight to a hot summer from winter time. It's just going to drop right into hot dry summer from a late winter ending season. So that brings with it tremendous chaos we see for the planting season of 2022. Think of the chaos we had when we had the El Nino historic flooding a few years back, and we were planting corn in late June. And had historic prevent plant, all that sort of thing. We think we could have a planting season far worse than that, because that was a problem of rain. And the rain, give a week of dry weather, the rain goes away. We think we could be dealing with a situation of frozen ground, soil temperatures not warm enough to plant, snow. We're looking at for record snowfall to be had, meaning that we could have ground that's still full of snow, that in during planting time. I mean, where 1 week isn't going to make it go away, because it's not going to get warm until like mid-May, and then of course it will go away. But by the time you've done that, it looks chaotic to us. And you of course talked about what it means for winter wheat. Think of what it means for winter wheat.
Right.
How's winter wheat going to prepare if it's trying to come out of dormancy? If winter lasts until, let's say, late April, early May, and we're getting late spring frosts, and we have snowpack late in the spring, in the typical spring season, I mean, how is the winter wheat crop going to handle that? I mean, if you remember back in that El Nino, we had that very, very late spring frost, and it caused all kinds of chaos. I don't know. It just looks to us like we really feel we're actually more worried about that going into a hot, dry summer again, that 22 spring, 22 summer, than we are about this drought cycle. The drought cycle is going to be bad? We've been here before. It's going to be, but that's not something the market is even remotely thinking about. And that's really what's going to me, the market says, okay, we have a drought. We've had droughts before, 2012, 1988. We know how they look. And I'm not trying to minimize it, but what's going to happen next spring, that's not happened before that I'm aware of any time in anyone's memory. And that's just going to catch the market. That's where we think a blow off top could happen, where you just do something crazy to the upside, like Minneapolis wheat in 08, we went to 25.
All right. Yep.
I don't think we ever saw higher than $5 Minneapolis wheat. Something. So you mentioned these targets that Sue Martin mentioned. She was the one on market to market program, and I know her very well, and she's a really smart, well thought of person. And I'm not saying that I agree with those targets necessarily, other than I did make the point in my last podcast that a Minneapolis wheat can happen in any market, meaning something can happen in any individual market where it can do something unimaginable. And it wouldn't surprise me if one of the markets that Sue mentioned actually does what she indicated. I mean, we go off. Maybe it's the KC wheat. Maybe it is the winter wheat market. Maybe it is the winter wheat market that does that. I don't know. But we're in an environment with this kind of weather that's unprecedented, and this kind of demand and tightness of supply, along with all this monetary madness going on. It is not outlandish to think that something. If you told anyone in 2005, when Minneapolis wheat was 4, that it would be 25 in 2008, they would absolutely have fired you on the spot and said you have no business being an analyst. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So keep an open mind. Things are going to happen, Casey, not only the next year and a half, the next 10 years, that are unthinkable in terms of what prices can do in this environment that we're in. It's really the perfect storm of monetary, weather, and demand. That's because remember, post ASF demand for feed, post virus demand, as people get back to doing normal. I mean, look at crude oil in the mid upper 60s now. There's this when people starting to drive again here in Florida. Traffic is as worse as ever was. So this is just you have to keep it on mind. And what I really want to convey to the great question you put out there: be careful of selling too much too soon, too early. I see so many analysts looking at 470 new crop corn and saying, "Oh, that's a great price to sell." No, it's not a great price to sell. It's not a great price to sell. You're going to be giving your new crop corn away if you sell too much. Doesn't mean you can't do a little. Of course, you have to sell some. But please do not oversell your forward crops. As much you'll be making the same mistake you made selling to all your corn at $375 and $390 when everyone said to do it. So
right. Yep. So lots of things to pay attention to, and lots of things to look at. No, I am waiting on pins and needles. It feels like some days to see what this fall looks like, just to see what happens. And with Dr. Zarkova, who did that interview with, and if you haven't listened to that, man, make sure you guys go check that out. That pretty well lays out how the sun affects the weather that we're talking about here, and then what does that look like on the backside. And she did a great job of laying that out. Very, very, very brilliant woman that has a better understanding of math than I could possibly ever grasp. So she has a lot of great information there. But she brought that very point up. About hey, we get a front stage view of what's going to happen here for the first time in really history, where we can really record things in a manner that in the last grand solar minimums, whether it be the Maunder or the Dalton, they didn't necessarily have the instruments and the tools and the way to record stuff. So there's going to be some great scientific data that is drawn from this, for sure.
Yeah, and I think we might be set up for a part 3 potentially,
yep,
where we might go over some other aspects of how the sun actually impacts temperature,
mm-hmm,
how that relates to CO2, and kind of have a little discussion about the temperature gradient and how all these moving pieces. A little bit of a different discussion than we had before. I think we might be ready to set that up, and that would be another really, really cool discussion that I'm definitely looking forward to if we can get that worked out.
Yep, so. Me too, definitely. I'm the same way. So, well, good stuff, Shawn. If folks want to reach out to you, get more information about what you're doing at Hackett Financial, and get maybe some of these sample reports, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, Hackett, advisors.com. We have all kinds of interviews and podcasts and sample reports and white papers that can go over what we do to see if how we look at the world and agriculture might be of value to your listeners.
Right on. Well, I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you're going to find the latest editions of the Moving Iron Podcast, as well as MovingIronLLC.com. You'll find the podcast, blogs, all the information about the Moving Iron Summit coming up here September 17th through the 18th. So if you're a dealer and you're interested in coming to that, make sure you go there, and you'll have all the information that you need to sign up with. Shawn will be there, and he's going to give a nice presentation about what we've been talking about here, but a little more in depth. So looking forward to that. And make sure you listen to the Dryland Farmer Podcast. The guys out there, Brent and Lane, and good friends of mine, they will definitely make you laugh throughout the day. So with that, I am Casey Seymour, Shawn Hackett. Let's go with some iron, folks. Out. You want to have a meaningful competitive advantage to help sell more equipment. Whether you represent the sales, parts, or management department of an implement dealership, there's a surprising amount of complexity when it comes to tire, wheel, and track technology. Let Axon worry about that so you can get back to supporting your customers. Axon has leveraged years of experience to create a streamlined process that gives you a proven path to help today's grower and sell more equipment. The roots of their organization go back almost 100 years to the invention of the rubber tractor tire. Supporting agriculture is the number one driver of Axon, from product development through sales and service. To find more or become an Axon dealer, head over to axontire.com.
Moving higher in the 21st century. Hardworking people